Any thoughts on how that might play out?
I mean, it's usually pretty close. It kind of all depends on whether or not the Titan player can assemble a really fast Titan. And I'm sure that's the name of the game.
Mhm.
But I've kind of seen the games go pretty long from time to time, and sometimes they can set up. They can play a little bit of a longer game with something like Cultivator Colossus, drawing a bunch of cards, and then that can kind of spiral into this one big turn where they maybe can play two Titans in the same turn through a Solitude or something like that. So
Mhm.
I think Cultivator Colossus, if that's present in Jack's list, is going to be really, really important in this matchup.
All right, well, let's go ahead and take a look at the deck list if we have them. If we have a moment here between Robert Hayes and Jack Potter. Here we go. Jack Potter's Amulet Titan deck. And you can see there is a
And there
copy
it
of
is.
Cultivator Colossus. Yep, indeed. Which, I mean, one copy in the deck, but really you can read that as something more akin to like 8 because of the Summoners Packs and the Tolaria West that can search them up. Other than that,
Yeah.
fairly stock list, I would say. And then here's Robert Hayes' 4-color elementals, which isn't quite stock, but if you're familiar with him, not too much of a variant from what he normally runs.
Yeah, and one thing that I want to point out in this matchup, there's a main deck Emrakul the Promised Land along with Traverse the Ulvenwald. That
Mhm.
is incredibly important because it essentially can just one-shot you if you can Emrakul your opponent, set up a Titan plus a Dryad and a Valakut turn, the Valakuts can target yourself. So you can just essentially, make your opponent kill themselves with the Emrakul turn. So
Right. Okay, so here we go. Kicking off the top 4. NRG Chicago. Let's go. Well, Robert Hayes, going to look for a little bit better hand here. Jack Potter looks happy. We are in the
and
elimination rounds here. Players have access to each other's deck lists. We are on the modified play draw rules, so the higher seed has preference, which means Robert Hayes has the choice here and will presumably be going first.
that's what I was looking for. I was trying to figure out who had the higher seed, but it's
Mhm.
right on the screen in front of me. I just need to look a little bit harder.
Yeah,
Yes, I get.
sometimes this information right in front of you still is hard to see. We misread
Yeah.
things all the time here, so you're fitting right in.
But yeah, Robert Hayes in the play definitely, obviously play draw. It matters a little bit, specifically because Jack's deck is obviously a lot more explosive on the play, but something like a turn one amulet can really get the ball rolling there. So yeah, we're with Robert being in the play is going to be able to maybe establish something like a Ren and 6 and something along those lines before Jack can get too much going on.
Right. But Robert Hayes looking for a better 5-card hand. I did see the Emrakul in the opener there. That's not exactly where you want to start with. And Jack Potter keeping 7. I mean, we saw him yesterday, the Amulet players. If you keep 7, there's a good chance there's an Amulet there, or at least there's a Saga. So Robert Hayes has got to know the pressure's on. There are answers, though. I mean, Robert Hayes, something like Prismatic Ending. There are easy answers to Amulet if they show up. And, you know, 5-card hand, you still have a perfectly functional hand. You just can't, you're not going to have any luxuries. You need to just have lands and early interaction.
Yeah, the one thing, as we talked about, the one thing about the 4-color deck that does, make it a little bit less prone to mulligans is the presence of Ren and 6. You can keep,
Mhm.
something like a fetch land and any other land, a Ren and 6, and 2 other spells, and that one Ren and 6 is going to make you hit every single land drop for the rest of the game. You're never going to miss a land drop. So even on something like a 5 or even a 4-card hand, Ren and 6 just really, really kind of gets the juices flowing there.
Yeah, indeed. That is a very important point, and we'll see what Rob Hayes can piece together here. So is it 5-card hand? Is it actually a 5-card, 8-card hand with Ren and 6, like you're saying?
Well, plus the Orion too, so
Mm-hmm.
could even.
Yeah. Yeah. If we get to the point where Yorion is actually being cashed in, then Robert Hayes is probably looking okay as far as at least stabilizing a little bit, but we'll see how this goes. 5 cards will work for Rob Hayes, and we are underway in the semifinals.
And if you're taking a look at Robert's hand, I do see a Ren and 6. So it looks like a couple
Okay.
lands, Omnath, and a Ren and 6. So definitely, not a bad 5-card hand. Just going to be able to hit his land drop stuff. But obviously, when the thing about mulliganing in the 4-color deck is it's a lot harder to have enough resources to utilize Solitude effectively,
Mm-hmm.
and especially when you're down to 5 cards. Even if you have something like a Ren and 6 to hit land drops, and you only have a couple of spells, and you have to pitch one for a Solitude, then you kind of run out of gas. So
Right. So we're actually not going to see the Ren 6 right away. So Rob is going. Oh, Rob is going to play Abundant Growth and does draw a Solitude.
there's a promo. I think that's a full art Ren and 6. I may be mistaken, but I thought it was.
Okay. Well, for Boros Garrison and bouncing the forest for Jack Potter, here's a Dryad. Here's the forest coming back down. So, okay. Solid start in development, but nothing terrifying yet.
Yeah, this is kind of exactly how you would draw it up for Jack's perspective. You know, the Amulet, the turn 2 Dryad, threatening a turn 3 Titan. The one
Mhm.
thing I will say is that because Jack has it, look, that may be his only bounce land. And
Mhm.
if Garrison's the only bounce land, it might be a little awkward because usually you want to fetch that one off of the Primeval Titan. Also,
Mhm.
because it doesn't tap for green mana, it could mess with the math in terms of actually casting the Primeval Titan this turn.
Yeah, okay. So let's see.
Okay, we do have
Okay.
a Growth Chamber for Jack, though.
So 2 mana on each of those plays there. So that is all the land drops for the turn. 7 mana available right now.
We're tapping 7. I wonder if he's got a Colossus, or he's just going to Titan with a mana floating. Okay, that.
All right, and this will get things going. So with, like you're pointing out, with the Boros Garrison in play, perhaps Vesuva would be a target here to be able to generate mana for haste. Okay, never mind. That's not even necessary. Here's Valakut and
Yeah, see, this is
Stronghold.
nice because Jack had the mana floating, so you can
Mhm.
float the mana. Then the
Right.
Valakut uses the other mana for the Stronghold. So very, very good sequencing from Jack. And because of the Dryad, getting the Valakut's also really nice too, because the Dryad plus Valakut. So
All right, here is Solitude pitching the Omnath that you spied in Robert's hand. So that will prevent things from getting completely out of hand, but still very nice start for Jack Potter here online with Valakut in play, with Dryad coming across, taking half the loyalty off Ren and 6, and with plenty of mana to get things going for the future turns as long as more Titans are available, or the Colossus.
yeah, I mean, at this point, because there's the Dryad in play, if Jack's got something like a Summoner's Pact, he'd probably just want to go for another Titan at this point.
Mhm.
Because you could see something like Titan get, say, even Valakut Vesuva, and you essentially have I can't really count that high, but that's a lot of Valakut triggers with the Dryad in play. So
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I have certainly played with Dryad and Valakut before, and it is quite delightful the way that just explodes when you start making land drops and playing multiple Valakuts. All right, Rob Hayes here plays his land drop. Still a few cards in hand. I think another copy of Solitude, so he may still have game here.
yeah, because even if he doesn't have a white card, he can just pick up the Orion, and then that's the white card for the Solitude.
Mhm.
Because you saw him pitch the Omnath, which would have been a good play this turn. So you'd have to think from Jack's perspective, well, if he's pitching Omnath, he either doesn't have any other white cards in hand, or potentially in this case, maybe can read that there's another Solitude in there because he wanted to back up Solitude.
All right, so 4 land in play now for Rob Hayes and Yorion into hand. So we do have ammo for this Solitude.
I think I got a glimpse of a Tolaria West in Jack's hand. We know about the Growth Chamber. I think I saw a second Dryad as well. That one's probably not worth too much here, the second Dryad, but
Mhm. Right. This first Dryad will be able to handle the Ren 6 in 2 more swings, regardless of what Robert Hayes decides to do with it. And the Solitude that could pick off the Dryad. I mean, the Dryad is an important card with the Valakut, but you're just saving that for Titan Colossus basically every time here, right? You're not going to ever fire that off.
no, you gotta kill the threats. I mean, maybe if Jack were to say, let's say hypothetically, Jack has a Valakut or a Vesuv in his hand, and he just goes like land drop plus second Valakut. Maybe if you're Robert at that point, you might consider it because
Mm.
now that there's 2 Valakut triggers with the Dryad, so you might have to think about that. But with the bounce lane, we're not going to see something like that because the bounce lane makes it so you can't, you won't be able to trigger the Dryad naturally, essentially with just hitting your 6 land drops.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we have 4 mana floating. Here is a Summoner's Pact.
I'm curious. I wonder if he goes for Titan or Colossus here.
It'd be fun to see Colossus.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So Cultivator
So
Colossus, 7 mana, and
yeah, we have 4 floating, so we can go
Mhm.
tap the Garrison in the forest, play Colossus, leave up the Strongholds, And this is going to give us not only a ton of Dryad triggers, or well, a ton of essentially Valakut triggers, but then we can also just haste the Colossus. So you're putting Robert in a position where now, if you have enough, if you have enough land triggers to, essentially deal what amounts to lethal with the Dryad, Robert has a decision of, well, do I kill the Dryad and deal with all these Valakut triggers, or and let my opponent have Colossus, in which case I'm going to take 1,000 because if we're going to get the Colossus haste. So.
All right, so let's see how many land drops are made here off the Colossus. So, all right, Tolaria West is in. That's one. Simic Rose Chamber. Sunhome, Simic Rose Chamber. Oh boy.
Oh
Saga.
Oh.
Selesnya Sanctuary. Still going. So there are multiple bounce land triggers and Valakut triggers on the stack, but none of that will resolve until after the Cultivator Colossus trigger is done, and that actually may never happen. Wow.
Yeah, this has to be lethal, right?
Yeah, this is a whole pile of
Oh my
land into
god.
play. All right, so that is well, I don't know, something like a dozen land in play at this point.
I think we've confirmed that you now have to kill the Dryad.
Yeah. Boy, yes, that is a good point. All these Valakut triggers on the stack do require the Dryad to still be in play when they resolve. So Rob can prevent that. However, that will mean that the Colossus is able to actually attack due to the Stronghold, and that 2 avenues to lethal damage, most likely. I'm not sure there are 17 land in play, but if not, it's close.
Well, the other thing is, too, you have to remember there's all these bounce lane triggers, right? So we have Tolaria West, which means we can float a bunch of mana, pick up Tolaria West, and then get a Titan, and probably just haste it again, because we can just float red-white, Vesuva, copy the Slayer Stronghold, untap, and then haste the Titan. So we can we can probably haste multiple Titans this turn.
Right, we're going to need to, as Solitude plus Ephemerate. Rob Hayes came to play. He's not going to go down too easy, so he's going to wipe out as much of the board as he can. And actually, that's everything. So both creatures out of here, but I mean, the Dryad didn't result in having a significant impact on this turn, but this Colossus sure did. There's no way to, from Robert Hayes' perspective, there's no way to undo the damage that just happened here.
If I counted correctly, I think Jack has 18 mana floating now. So, well, after we float all these. So 4 triggers, pick up 2 Tolaria West, maybe pick up a bounce land. But yeah, float mana, pick up the 2 West. And then with 18 mana, you can just transmute both West down to 12, cast double Titan, and then copy the Slayer Stronghold. Yeah, okay. We're done.
Well, that was impressive. That was fun, and Robert Hayes has got some work to do to come back in this matchup.
Right, and I know we had talked about the Cultivator Colossus before the match, and that's exactly what I was talking about when I said that. It's just, it forces your opponent to have a pile of removal, because you see Robert had to answer the Dryad that was in play, the Colossus that was going to attack him, and then it also still provides you at least 1, maybe 2 Titans in the case of having that many land drops. So it just forces your opponent to have 5 or 6 answers, and they just don't really have they don't have that amount of answers. So.
Right. I mean, it is tough to anytime your opponent, I mean, how many Colossus triggers were there? How many cards came off the top? Maybe 6 or 8.
I can't count that high.
Yeah. So, yeah, a whole lot of advantage there on multiple ways on the board, in hand, and damage coming across, even life gained because of the Solitude. Just everything was working well there for Jack Potter. Let's go ahead and revisit the deck list and see what Rob Hayes might find to kind of prevent that from happening again. And we do see one significant card. I'm not going to say it's enough by itself, but it helps at the very least in the sideboard there, sticking out the 1 red card.
Yeah, it's really nice that the 4-color deck gets to play Magus of the Moon. But yeah, jokes aside, we do have Magus of the Moon. We have 3 copies of Traverse to find it, so that one's definitely going to come in. One card that's usually incredible against these Amulet decks is Force of Vigor, and a card that you see absent from Robert Hayes' sideboard. So definitely something that Robert wished that he had access to. But there are some Boseijus that are going to be coming in as well. Boseiju plus Renin 6, if you set that up, that can be kind of backbreaking against Amulet as well, and potentially Chalice the Void to stop Summoner's Pact.
Yeah, and we did see that yesterday too. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at Jack Potter's deck list again. Very much trying to defend his position, early game advantage here. Doesn't really need to, just needs to really beat Robert Hayes' sideboard plan. Doesn't need to defeat Robert Hayes' late game, because that's, I mean, there's no late game that's really going to jar with Emrakul. So we're looking at here. So the Force of Vigors that you mentioned here, not so much helpful on this side of the matchup. And really, there is an Emrakul though. Would this be a matchup you think where Jack Potter would bring it board in his Emrakul? Seems like a possibility.
Oh yeah, definitely gonna want to bring in that one. The nice thing is if both players are just kind of sitting there for a little bit, like Jack can maybe set up an Emrakul where you see something like Emrakul, then on Robert Hayes' turn he just kind of basically deploy all of his answers. Like you can just like pitch cast a couple Solitudes.
Mm-hmm.
Teferi maybe can even bounce the Emrakul from, you can go like Teferi, bounce the Emrakul, then get another shot at an extra turn. So yeah, this is definitely an Emrakul matchup. I'm not 100% sure that Jack wants anything else.
Mm-hmm.
You maybe could see him turn to something like Dismember for Omnath, but I'm not even sure if that's the kind of game he wants to fight in this matchup.
Right. I mean, December can also disrupt like Ephemerate on Solitude, things like that. But if there's Ephemerating on Solitude, that means Jack's got a lot going on anyway. As we saw that last game, Robert Solituded the entire board, and Jack didn't care. Like you pointed out, 18 mana floating in Tolaria West all over the place. He can just rebuild without even passing the turn.
Right, yeah, there's just a lot that Jack can produce. So yeah, I'm not really sure if he wants to change too much here outside of that Emrakul. Maybe could look at something like Relica Progenitus because he knows that Ren and 6 plus Boseiju is an option. But again, pretty marginal stuff there. Just maybe a small upgrade with the Emrakul.
Right. All right. So the players shuffling out for game 2. Jack Potter has not abandoned the pile shuffling standard, so we'll wait for that to work its way through. If in any additional, like you're playing for money, points, you're playing on camera for your reputation, your pride, all this stuff, whatever you value going into the series, does the invite being in the line change anything for you personally? Like, does it make you feel more pressure?
Well, so I know that I believe Jack is from Canada, and I know that I believe that Jack may already have an invite, so I'm not 100% positive, but it's it's definitely something that you want to strive for, especially if that's competitive aspirations. I know I played a couple of these RCQs. I know you have as well, and I definitely want to win that. But yeah, when something additional on the line, there's always something more to play for. So definitely the stakes are a little bit higher here.
Yeah, indeed. Although I'm not sure that, like, at some point the stakes being higher doesn't change how much pressure, how much stress you may feel. Like if you're playing, let's just say, a 5K versus an 8K, I don't know that I feel any different with what's on the line. The RCQ invite is a unique thing, so it's hard to judge. But I'm sure these players, after either a comfortable night of sleep or a restless night where they are maybe having trouble getting to sleep, thinking about their matches this morning. We'll see. That's going to be different for every individual as the hands are drawn up for game 2. Rob Hayes looking to keep more than 5 cards and get off to a little bit better start than he did last game.
I don't know about you, but whenever I'm sleeping for like day 2 of an event, especially like GP or PT or something like that, I can never sleep that well.
I know it is tough. Yeah. Although I do think I sleep better for day 2 than I do for day 1, because day 1 you're coming in, you're not like the players that went through 9 rounds of Swiss yesterday plus the quarterfinals. I mean, this is a mental game. We're not running around. We're not playing, a physical like sport, but I mean, it's draining. Like these players, if you haven't engaged in a long day of Magic, these players are weary by the end of it.
Oh yeah, the mental gymnastics, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I remember reading that elite chess players. Now, I'm not going to compare Magic to chess as far as the strain. I mean, the elite chess players, though, are burning thousands and thousands of calories a day playing chess because it's just so draining. Doesn't mean just because it's a skull sport doesn't mean you're not burning off energy. All right. So Forest Oath for Robert. Boseiju, Grazer, Saga for Mr. Potter. Respectable start on both sides.
Good start for Potter. I'd love to see you want to see Amulet on turn 1, and while Saga's not directly an Amulet, it's going to be, essentially an Amulet with Suspend too, so kind of get the ball rolling, and then an Oath of Nissa. This could be a potential Renin 6 here on turn 2, which, if Robert has something like a Boseiju, could maybe kind of help blow up the Saga and start to get that train rolling. So looks like we do have a Renin 6.
Yeah, and we saw him indicate the Oath of Nissa to preemptively inform Jack Potter, yeah, don't worry about this planes. Remember, Oath of Nissa lets me cast Planeswalkers for any mana, so you are correct. There is the Renin 6 in play. So solid start.
I don't know how much. I know you've been playing a little bit of Pioneer, but did you see the mono green devotion decks have now been playing with Nicol Bolas, the Dragon God, and they're casting it only off of Oath of Nissa?
I have seen that, yes, and yeah, animals they are. Whoever came up with that, but Rob Hayes here. Okay, now we have the mana to actually cast the spells we already have on the board, so that's nice just for completion's sake.
Robert's just showing off. We're gonna cast the Teferi off of Stomping Ground Forest Plains. Could have, got any blue source, any land he wanted to. I guess he could be casting Magus of the Moon, so maybe I'm wrong there, but just the Orion.
Okay. And discard the hand size, not too much of an issue with the Ren 6 to be able to pick it back up. So Jack Potter, this is kind of the big turn here.
Yeah, no Magus, no Teferi, no turn 3 play for Robert. Kind of interesting from Jack's perspective. Like, what do you, if you're in Jack's seat, what are you kind of putting Robert on at this point? I mean, probably some Solitudes, but yeah, no 3-mana play, so probably has some sort of interaction there with the Solitudes.
All right, so there was a sequencing there. It looked like early timing issue as Robert Hayes discarded hand size, and I think normally that is the final step of a turn, but Jack Potter was probably saying, hey, I wanted to respond to that. I wanted to make a construct. So the construct does come in. Then the land is discarded, and Jack Potter, untaps for turn 3, rolls the Saga up to 3, and I guess he's debating whether to make a construct because I think we're pretty confident that Saga is searching up an amulet at this point.
Right, yeah, it kind of all depends on... Okay, yeah, what kind of Jack it has in hand. Now, I saw an Azusa, so I guess we're doing some math here. So you see something like Jack say, get an amulet, use the mana floating and the remaining 2 lands to play the Azusa, and then with the bounce land, you can actually play that 3 times, which would be 6 mana. You saw Jack motioning there. That we did talk about sideboarding. I wasn't sure if he was going to bring in the relic, and he did. Which I think the reason he brought in the relic, normally it's not something you want 100% of the time against Ren, but because Robert has so many Boseijus, and Jack recognizes that Boseiju plus Ren and 6 is really hard for his deck to interact with, does want to bring in those relics.
Right, and yet then after second guessing himself, does go with the amulet, which would mean there's probably some fireworks to be had here. Explore to start the turn. So 4 land drops available here. There's 1. There's 2.
Yeah, if he plays the Azusa, which he may not play the Azusa.
Right.
We are okay.
Okay, no land.
Yeah, Azusa pass. So Jack was probably missing the bounce lane because it seemed like he had everything else rolled up. Had the Azusa, had the amulet, but looks like he was missing a bounce land.
Okay, well, given the window, Rob Hayes will take down the amulet. There is a Saga on the board, so a couple more turns later, another amulet may be searched up, but Rob Hayes is just going to try and build a good position as possible before that point.
Did we not activate Ren and 6 there? Am I missing?
I feel like I missed. Yeah, okay. He killed. I was just realizing the construct was gone. Yes, the Ren 6 shot the construct. Right.
Okay. Yep. Ending the amulet constructs to 1/1 Ren and 6 ping it. That makes more sense. Got it.
Well, this game is so far playing out much more fair from Jack Potter's side than the last one. That's not what he's looking to do, but that is what the reality he's faced with right now. So he's going to have to cobble together a more, a real game here, not one where he just explodes and wins all at once. And
go ahead.
I was going to say that's the game that Robert Hayes wants to play. Is the longer drawn out game. This is more the battleground that his deck is designed to win on.
Right. This is very, very similar to a match that we saw yesterday with it was Will Kruger playing against I believe it was Andrew Ellenbogen, and Will's draw had multiple sagas, and we kind of talked about like that's not necessarily the game that you want to be playing from the Hammer player perspective, and even in the Amulet player's perspective in this game. But sometimes it's just the way that your draw lines up, and Robert Hayes did have the answer to the Amulet to kind of make Jack's draw a little bit more fair, like you said.
Yep. So here's Omnath. Point we never got to in the previous game. Fetch lands in hand. There is access to a Solitude, I believe, although I don't know that necessarily you want a Solitude to Azusa either. Jack has had it in play for multiple turns now and not made any use of it at all.
Yeah, you know that Jack's kind of light on lands because he didn't play any additional lands off of the Azusa, and then he played no lands last turn. Now, Jack could be posturing here, maybe could be slow rolling a bounce land, especially because he couldn't really do anything with the bounce land that turn, and doesn't want to kind of give his hand away if he drew the bounce land because he's going to set up, Saga for Amulet next turn, play the bounce land, then just kind of go off all on one swing. So maybe kind of, if he drew the bounce land, maybe baiting a little bit.
All right, here is a Solitude. So Rob Hayes does deploy Solitude to take out Azusa. I mean, this is his only way to get it on the board. He doesn't have the mana to flash in Solitude on Jack's turn because of the Omnath trigger. And having it on the board does make it available for Ephemerates later on. So we'll see if he's planning on blinking that Solitude at a later point. Construct into play off of the Saga, and now Jack Potter is going searching again.
And if Jack did find a bounce land, we do have enough mana because we got one floating, plus 3 more is 4, plus the bounce land would be 6. So if he found a bounce land, we do have enough for a Titan. And because he's not making a construct, it leads me to believe that we have some other plans for the rest of our mana. So I would guess there's a Titan in our future.
All right. Well, let's see. Here
That works.
we go. So that's a Crumbling Vestige, I think. So that generates 2 mana, although in a different way. It's 1 free, 1 plus the untap, and Jack Potter's like, oh, I'm going to play this Titan, but I'm going to throw it on the floor first.
Yeah, we're just throwing Titans at each other at this point. So now it's a question of, does Jack expect a second copy of Solitude? Because in a situation like this, normally you would just say, oh, well, I'll just get Slayer Stronghold and Boros Garrison. But if you expect your opponent to have Solitude, you might want to just play a little bit slower and just say, okay, I'll get a Growth Chamber and a Tolaria West to set up another Titan for next turn, expecting this one to get Solituded.
And Jack consulting the grip here and making his determination on that. And let's see. And the answer is he's hoping Rob Hayes does not have another Solitude.
We're going, or maybe Jack just has another Titan in his hand, doesn't really care if there's a Solitude.
Here's the attack, and we wait to see. And Rob Hayes is like, okay, so Titan attack trigger happens, and that means that Jack Potter gets to search out a couple more lands. And then Rob Hayes will determine whether he wants to do much blocking here. Titan could be attacking running 6, although that doesn't seem necessarily likely. But the attack trigger,
with Robert,
is the more important part.
With Robert at 15, I kind of have to imagine you're just trying to get the pressure on him at this point. But yeah, the question is, what do we get from Jax here? Now, I'm going to guess, T West plus bounce line. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of awkward when you get this in combat because you can't. You can only transmute at sorcery speed, so you can't say float the mana and then use it because you've already made your land drop, don't have access to another blue mana in second main phase. So you won't be able to transmute it this turn, but definitely a good setup for next turn.
All right, so this Titan's coming across for 8 here. And there is a block available. Robert Hayes can double block to trade with the Titan.
Yeah, I think Robert just took it.
Yeah. I mean, it's completely reasonable. Omnath trigger staying on the board, and then Solitude with the potential for Ephemerate. Going from 15 to 7 really isn't that significant, I would say at this point.
Especially because we can just gain 4 off the Omnath. And if, we did mention that Robert has, Ephemerate, we can just Ephemerate the Solitude right now, get rid of the Titan, and then, gain 4 off of that, so... Yeah, the Ephemerate's going to be able to clean up this Titan. Now, the question is, does Jack have enough to set up another Titan? We mentioned that Tolaria West is in hand, Jack doesn't currently have access to a second blue mana without playing the Tolaria West, but obviously if you play the Tolaria West, you won't be able to transmute it. So Jack needs to figure out, oh, actually no, because we have the Vestige. Okay, my apologies. So we can go Vestige, make blue, use the blue plus the Growth Chamber, transmute. That would be colorless 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, we have enough to Titan again next turn.
Okay, so Rob Hayes has the information that he needs to deal with a Titan in play and one potentially coming from hand, because the information that the line you just went through, Rob Hayes is aware of all of that being in Jack's hand, so he knows what he's facing down here. Fetch did happen, so we have the mana trigger. We have a Teferi. Right, Construct leaves the board. Rob Hayes picks up an additional card.
Still 1 mana floating from the Omnath, so we'll see if he wants to use that. He did pick up Yorion on an earlier turn, so remember, that is an option as well. You can see, just cast the Yorion, blink Teferi, blink the Solitude, blink the Omnath. That could take care of the Titan, and then you could hold up the Ephemerate, because you have a mana floating, which means the Yorion essentially only costs 4, and then, hold up the Ephemerate that way. So we might actually see that from Robert.
Is there, in fact, did you see an Ephemerate in his hand? Or were we just speculating?
I thought I might have seen it. There's Robert's cards are all foil, so it's kind of hard to tell sometimes. But
all right, so here we do see 4 additional mana plus the one that we know is floating. Like you said, there is the Yorion, and we'll blink out everything possible.
Why not? It's all going away. It'll come back. Don't worry. I saw a Coatl.
All right, so here we go. On the way back in. Oath of Nissa, a couple planeswalkers rescind their loyalty, Solitude, and Omnath. So, marginally powerful Yorion here. 5 mana, doesn't cost you a card, and you get back a card and anticipate for a creature or a planeswalker, a Swords of Plowshares, and reset your loyalty. No problem. All right, Titan is removed. That is a big step. Fetch land found off the Oath of Nissa. That's not overly relevant. Card drawn. Another Solitude. That matters.
That one's definitely relevant.
Yep.
So yeah, Robert, I believe I saw a second Omnath. So yeah, so Robert does have access to pitch cast that Solitude here. And then potentially, if he does have the Ephemerate, could have double Solitude up here.
And with go ahead.
I was going to say, from this perspective, it seems a little difficult for Jack. I mean, he does have access to another Titan, but I feel like Robert just has too many answers at this point.
Jack Potter needs to do 10 additional damage. That seems, at this point, that 10 may as well be, 2 or 30. It doesn't really matter. He's going to do virtually infinite with something like Colossus and Dryad and a couple Valakuts, or he's going to do nothing.
Right. I think at this point, Jack might be trying to. This might be the point of the game where we probably just have to get to Emrakul, right? So you see something, maybe if an Emrakul comes down for Jack, could maybe force Robert into casting a lot of his interactive spells. Maybe you could say something like Solitude with his own Omnath, Solitude the Yorion, Ephemerate, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's gonna be kind of an uphill battle for Jack at this point, I think.
Yeah, and with the one Emrakul, that's not going to be easy for Jack to get into hand either, as he can't Pact for that. But we'll see. We are a little ways into the game. Some cards have been drawn. Perhaps it's present. Here is a Pact. Now, Pact only gets green creatures, that's correct, right?
Yes. Yeah, only green creatures. So we're looking at Dryad, Titan, Colossus. Yeah, so with the Emrakul, you kind of have to just draw it, but we're going for Colossus, which makes a lot of sense. There's no counterspell available for Robert Hayes, so Colossus with the Amulet in play is going to set up something like we saw last game. Now the question is, does Jack have enough land drops to kind of get enough mana and get to that point where we're casting double Titan after the Colossus? And B, does Robert have that Ephemerate? Because we know Robert has Solitude. We just don't know if he has another answer lined up as well.
All right, so Jack, the Pact trigger to pay next turn. Now, Obviously, you lose the game if you're unable to pay for the Pact. If Robert Hayes was able to Emrakul next turn and take control of Jack's succeeding turn, would he be able
Oh,
to? Can you choose to not pay for the Pact?
you can. I believe you can.
Yeah.
Because I think that came up in I was watching a coverage last weekend or a couple weekends ago.
Mhm.
I forget what it was, but I believe that has come up before, and I think you can choose not to pay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So 5 land so far, 6th. Colossus doing his work here. I mean, this
Yeah,
is what Jack needs. Vesuva. So even though the triggers all resolve after the Colossus is done, the Vesuva does need to choose something immediately as it comes into play. As that's not a trigger, that's just an effect. As part of it coming into play, it has to copy something.
right. So you can't Vesuva copy one of the Colossus lands. You have to copy something that's already in play. Oh, they are. Okay.
All right.
Got
So
it.
here is. I don't actually see what maybe 1 or 2 bounce lands here. Just 1 plus a Vesuva, I think. So most of these lands are actually going to stay in play, which actually might not work to Jack's advantage. He may actually desire to bounce several of these. But the
There's a lot
Colossus
of
is
mana.
done. Looks like about 9 cards drawn. So, and
Looks
with
like
all the
Vesuva copied a bounce land too.
and with all these lands untapping, if
Oh.
the Emrakul was drawn, their mana is available for it. Wow.
Oh. Oh boy. Well, we might get into some fireworks here. I would not be surprised to see 4 Primeval Titans attacking. Well, I guess there's only 3 left in the deck, but I'm pretty sure Jack can haste all 3 Primeval Titans. Maybe not though.
Well, we
We'll see.
right. Well, I mean, we're speculating that Rob might be able to deal with 2. I suppose he could block a 3rd, so that may not actually, without a Dryad, I mean, that may be survivable.
Yeah, because I'm assuming Jack can also set up a Dryad too. Because I think there's
Mhm.
2 Tolaria West. So you could see something like bounce land, float mana with T West, pick it up, transmute that, Pact for Dryad, and then. Well, I guess you still want to get the other Titan first. So we'll see how Jack plays this out. But yeah, I think we can go. You maybe float mana with this one, pick up the first T West, Pact for another Titan. Then the second Titan get another bounce land, and then that T West gets Dryad. You haste both Titans attack. Yeah, we could see something like that. But then if Robert does have the answer for the 2 Titans, then you're left where I guess you can still attack with the Colossus at that point.
All right, so that is the Tolaria West being transmuted here. Summoner's Pact number 2 does resolve.
So this gets Dryad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from Jack's perspective, you have to assume there's at least 1 Solitude in Robert's hand. Like there is
Right.
7 cards there, so you got to imagine he can at least answer one of these Titans. So the question is, can Jack produce a second Titan and give them both haste?
So if Jack Potter is going to continue here, here's a Vesuva. Putting the Dryad on the board first. Ooh, okay. Valakut takes out Solitude. So Ephemerate off the
No
table.
Ephemerate.
Right.
Okay, Robert's at 10. I mean, this might just be lethal, right? We could just, we just have Dryad, or we have Valakut. There's a Vesuva as well, so we can copy Valakut. We might not even be able to might be able to lethal without even going to the combat step. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it.
and Robert Hayes will extend the hand, and Jack Potter and Amulet Titan will advance to the finals. An impressive display here. There were a lot of game actions there. Jack Potter moved through that fairly quickly. Obviously, a lot of experience with the deck, and congratulations on making it to the finals. Wow, that was fun to watch.
That was, and that match was honestly decided by Cultivator Colossus both times. I know we had talked about it in before the match even started, as we pointed that out as kind of the most important card in Jack's deck, and it easily won him the game both times. So
yeah, no, that was super cool. All right, secondary match. Let's go. We're moving in live. No recordings here. Maxx Kominowski and Zach Dubin we are, looks like we're in, we'll get those pips cleaned up as there is a relic from the previous screen. So we'll see what game we're actually in here. I'm going to guess this is actually game 2 is Zach. Well, we'll see. Okay, it is game 2.
Zach up one.
Zach Dubin up a game and well ahead on the board at the moment.
Yeah, this one's not looking great for Maxx here. He got,
No.
Ren and 6, Omnath, Yorion, Maxx pretty much on empty here, so.
And this is, I mean, this is tough. I mean, this matchup, Murktide versus 4-color Blink. I mean, there's, when you get to, I don't know what turn you think we're on here, 10, 12, something like that. It can be tough for the Murktide deck to overcome the powers of the 4-color Blink deck. We see Yorion's already in play. Omnath, Planeswalkers. You're fighting uphill here.
Yeah, I think the reason this matchup is so tough from the Murktide side is because the Omnath deck is able to keep up with at parity or ahead in card, card advantage almost throughout the entire game. And they also, while doing that, also have excellent answers to all of the blue-red threats. They have the cheap removal to answer Ragavan and DRC, Shredder, and then you have stuff like Solitude to answer Murktide. So this matchup seems kind of tough every time that I've watched it for the Murktide perspective.
Right. Dash Ragavan comes across there, hoping to hit something significantly impactful, finds a land, and turn is passed. And yeah, Zach Dubin with looks like an attack for 8 here. Maxx only at 11.
Oh boy, we even have Ren plus Otawara, just in case Maxx even had the threat of. Actually, this might just be lethal with the land, the Omnath triggers, right? If there's another fetch land in play.
If there was, so the land was just played. But you're right. If there's already a fetch in play, which I don't see one at the moment, there might be one under the Rainforest. Probably not, as Zach does pass here. But with a Rainforest sitting in play, you're right that next turn combat wouldn't even be required. Another initial fetch land with the Omnath level 3 trigger would end things.
Yeah, I think I see Max's hand is something like Counterspell, Ragavan, Dress Down, Engineered Explosives. None of those cards looking too great on this board.
No, Engineered Explosives is an interesting one to have in here at this point. All right, here is Dress Down. Maxx actually at 2.
All right, so might have been something else. I don't know if it was like explosives. But basically, just like all reactive cards that answer the stack. The Murktide deck has a lot of counter spells, but once you've gotten to this point of the game where there's too many threats already in play, your counter spells don't really, they're not really worth that much at that point.
All right, so Shudder Bauble allows Maxx to look at an additional card here. Bauble takes a peek, and
Maxx maybe has a fetch land. Let me go. Okay, I mean, that's a card, but we know about the Otawara, so
this is a very respectable turn, and I'm not sure it's going to help much, as even if attacks can be prevented, like you were saying, Omnath with fetch lands is available, so Maxx needs an answer to the Omnath on the board, and I'm not sure he's got it.
Yeah, we could also just go EOT, Otawara the Murktide, untap, get back Otawara with Ren, Otawara the Shredder, attack with both. That's even lethal right there.
All right, the Murktide towers were forgotten. Maxx put them back on there. Then it does get bounced by Otawara. And yeah, and Zach Dubin looking solid here. In fact, draws another Ren and 6. So the Ren and 6, sequence could actually finish the game as well. That's another route to victory here for Zach. And 2 Ren and 6s in play. One of them.
What's going on here? I assume this is lethal.
Looks like, yep, and there it is. And Zach Dubin will advance. So Maxx Kominowski falls in the semifinals, and we have our finalists. Jack Potter and Zach Dubin will play for the title of the Energy Chicago Modern 10K champion.